My name is Emily Harper. I've been quietly paying the mortgage on a house I don't even live in because my sister asked me to lie for her. No one knows the truth, but when they find out, it won't be pretty. Before we dive in, tell me, where are you watching this from? I love seeing where everyone tunes in. Drop your city or country in the comments. The kitchen lights hummed faintly above us, casting a soft, flickering glow on the faded countertops. It was late, too late for a conversation like this. But that never stopped Vanessa. She leaned in close, her eyes wide, voice barely a whisper. Please, Emily, just take care of the mortgage, just for a little while. Mom and Dad can't handle that stress right now. I blinked, confused. You mean you're part of the mortgage? No, ours, she said quickly, then softened. Well, mostly yours, you're better with money. I should have said no. I should have pointed out that Vanessa was the one who'd begged our parents to co-sign on this house in the first place. That her little fashion blog wasn't paying the bills, no matter how many faux leather jackets she posed in. But all that stuck in my throat was a weak, breathless, "You haven't told them." Vanessa's smile was too quick, too relieved. It would crush them. You know how Dad gets one late bill and he'll think we're all going under. She touched my arm, her voice syrupy with guilt and something else, something colder beneath the sweetness. You've always been the responsible one, Em, just until I catch up. And just like that, I nodded. I didn't even recognize the version of me that agreed. The one who wanted for a moment to be the fixer. The good daughter. Maybe if I helped hold the family together this time, someone would finally see me for it. As Vanessa bounced away, literally, her hair flipping behind her like she was in a shampoo commercial, I stood there in the hum of the fridge, staring at the empty mug I hadn't even taken a sip from. My hands curled around it anyway. I needed to hold something. The silence after she left was almost louder than the conversation, like the walls themselves were processing what just happened. The absurdity of it all began to settle in. I was 34. I had my own apartment, my own life, or so I thought. Yet here I was, being roped into bailing out the family home quietly, like some invisible lifeline no one wanted to admit they needed. She didn't even say thank you, just that glib smile, that shrug. That skip in her step like she just passed off a gym bag after a long run and could finally rest. And here I was holding all the weight. I pulled out my phone and logged into my banking app, setting up the recurring transfer. My fingers hovered over the confirmation button. This was madness. Why was I doing this? But then I heard my father's voice in my head, Vanessa's under so much pressure, and my mother's, "You're just better at handling things, sweetheart." They never asked if I wanted to. They just assumed I could. I hit confirm. And with it, something shifted inside me, not satisfaction, not pride, but a hollow ache, like I just signed away another piece of myself for a cause that would never bear my name. I left the kitchen without turning off the light. Let it burn, because I just agreed to carry a burden I wouldn't get credit for. Again. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought, maybe this time they'll notice. But deep down, I already knew better. The scent of rosemary chicken filled the house I didn't live in but quietly paid for. My mother always roasted it a little too long, but tonight it smelled like perfection, like effort, like family. I took a deep breath as I stepped through the door, the mortgage folder still fresh in my memory, though safely hidden away back home. Vanessa was already there, perched at the kitchen island, laughing at something on her phone. Her hair was newly dyed, honey blonde, with the kind of careless waves that probably took 2 hours and 3 products to achieve. "Vanessa, that color looks amazing on you," Mom gushed as she stirred gravy at the stove. "You look so vibrant lately. That blog of yours must be really taking off." Vanessa giggled. "I've been trying new lighting setups for my reels. Engagement is up, so maybe." I hovered just inside the archway, invisible. Not literally, obviously. I was holding a pie dish and had just driven 40 minutes through traffic to be here, but you wouldn't have known it. Dad walked in and kissed Mom on the cheek. "Smells like a holiday in here. You girls spoil us." "You mean Vanessa spoils us," Mom said, smiling at her like she hung the stars. I cleared my throat softly and placed the pie on the counter. "I brought pecan. Your favorite, Dad." "Oh, that's right," he said absently, already glancing toward the dining room. "Can you set the table, Em?" Of course. I pulled the dishes from the cabinet, laying them out with mechanical precision. forks to the left. Napkins folded, the choreography of being useful. We all sat down 15 minutes later, the table brimming with food and chatter. Vanessa launched into a story about a brand reaching out to her, how they might want her for a fall campaign. "That's huge," Mom clapped. "Didn't I always say you had an eye for trends?" "You did," Vanessa beamed, soaking it in. I spooned mashed potatoes onto my plate slowly, waiting for a glance, a smile, a scrap of acknowledgement. Nothing. "Emily, could you pass the potatoes, sweetheart?" Mom asked, without really looking at me. I nodded and handed them over. My lips curled into a practiced, polite smile, the kind I'd perfected over the years. A smile that said, "I'm fine. Keep going. Pretend I'm not here." Vanessa dabbed at her mouth with a cloth napkin. I was thinking of redecorating the upstairs bathroom, maybe something coastal, like sage greens and driftwood shelves. Mom nodded eagerly. "I'll come help you shop. It's your space. You should love it." My space. The words echoed, quiet and sharp. They had no idea I'd covered the last 3 months of mortgage payments. No idea that while Vanessa picked out sage towels and sea glass soap dispensers, I was cutting corners in my own life just to keep this house running. I wanted to blurt it out. Just once. Not to be cruel, not to shame her, but to be seen. Instead, I passed the carrots. My father launched into a story from work, some miscommunication with a vendor that turned into a joke. Everyone laughed. Even me, sort of. But somewhere between Vanessa's twinkling laughter and my mom's delighted sighs, I felt my stomach tighten. Not from the food, but from the weight of not existing in the way that mattered. Because this wasn't new. This was just more of the same. All my life, Vanessa had been the spark. The tantrum-throwing, stage-stealing, spotlight-holding spark. And me? I was the steady background light. Reliable, soft, forgettable. I reached for my water glass, my hand steady despite the ache. Maybe it was foolish to think that stepping up again would change anything. Maybe love in this family only worked when it came with fireworks. I caught Vanessa watching me for a brief second, her expression unreadable. Then she turned to Mom. "Did you see the comments on my last post? Someone said I look like Blake Lively." Mom gasped. "You do." Of course she did. I excused myself to the kitchen, saying I needed to check on the pie. Really, I just needed to breathe. Leaning against the counter, I looked toward the family room, the couch, the hallway, the walls I helped protect without anyone knowing. It wasn't even about the money anymore. It was about how many times you could show up for people who never once thought to ask if you wanted to. And still I stayed. Still I smiled. Because hope, like habit, dies slow. That night I lay flat on my back, staring at the ceiling as if answers were hidden in the drywall. The silence of my apartment wrapped around me, no laughter, no clinking silverware, no one interrupting with stories that didn't involve me. Just quiet. I hadn't said a word about the mortgage. Again. And no one had asked. I should have felt peace in the calm of my space, the scent of lavender from a candle flickering on my nightstand. But peace didn't come. Not even close. Instead, a memory pressed its way into my mind, uninvited, insistent. Halloween. I was 10. Vanessa had insisted on being Cleopatra, complete with gold bangles, fake braids, and a handmade staff our dad stayed up half the night helping her build. I had wanted to be a librarian. I thought it was funny, bookish and ironic since I read under the covers more than I slept. I pieced together my costume myself. Wore one of Mom's old cardigans and made glasses out of pipe cleaners. No one asked what I was. The photo that made it into the family album, Vanessa posing like royalty in the living room, all teeth and glitter, while I sat cross-legged on the floor behind her, out of focus, holding a book. I wasn't even looking at the camera. Vanessa won the neighborhood costume contest. Our parents beamed as she walked up to claim her plastic trophy. That night we stopped for ice cream to celebrate. Vanessa got 2 scoops of chocolate chip cookie dough. I didn't get anything. "I thought I did pretty good," ID said, tentative, from the back seat. Mom turned around and smiled, distracted. "You did, sweetheart, but Vanessa won. Maybe next year, huh?" I remember how cold the car seat felt under me. How I swallowed my tears and tried to be happy for my sister. It wasn't her fault, I told myself. She didn't make them overlook me. And yet that moment folded itself neatly into the hundreds that followed. Missed birthdays, unopened report cards filled with straight A's, Mom's constant refrain, "Vanessa just needs more attention," Dad's quiet approval when I did things without needing help. Even back then, I understood my role, the easy child, the background daughter. I was the one who didn't rock the boat. And that identity, it stuck. Back in my bed, I reached for my phone and opened my camera roll, scanning past screenshots of recipes and grocery lists until I landed on the folder labeled Family. I found a photo from last Christmas, Vanessa in front of the tree, grinning, holding a new designer bag. I was in the back again, arms crossed, half hidden behind a strand of tinsel. Out of habit, I zoomed in on my own face, expressionless, forgotten. I locked the phone and set it down, the ceiling unchanged above me. My eyes stung, but I didn't cry, not really. It felt too old, too worn out for tears. I'd been carrying this for years, this ache of being the one who didn't need anything and therefore didn't get anything either. And now, even as I drained my own savings to keep the house afloat, they still couldn't see it, couldn't see me. A part of me whispered that I should just tell them, demand to be acknowledged. But then I pictured my mother's worried look. "Emily, why didn't you say something sooner?" And my father's quiet disappointment, like I'd made things harder by not playing my role correctly. Vanessa would shrug and say, "I thought you didn't mind." Because that's the story they all believed, that I didn't mind. But I did. I minded more than I could admit. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. A car passed outside, headlights slicing across the ceiling. I closed my eyes and tried to picture something different. A life where I was visible, where doing the right thing didn't feel like a punishment, where I could breathe without constantly shrinking. But all I could see was that 10-year-old girl in pipe cleaner glasses, holding a book no one asked about. And even now, decades later, I still hadn't put it down. The office was barely furnished, white walls, soft gray chairs, and a single plant that looked like it had never known stress. It was the kind of space that didn't speak unless spoken to, which made it perfect for what it was. Dr. Brooks always wore earth tones. Calming, grounded. Today it was a brown sweater and flat shoes. No clipboard, no fake sympathy, just that steady gaze waiting for me to begin. I'd been coming for 6 months. Most sessions started with small talk. Weather, work, things that didn't matter. But today something heavier had followed me in, settled across my chest like wet wool. I took a breath. "My birthday was last week." Dr. Brooks nodded. "How was it?" "Fine," I said too quickly. "Quiet." Her eyes didn't move. "They forgot again," I added after a long pause. The silence between us thickened. I picked at the edge of my sleeve. "Vanessa got a new cookware set from our parents. I got a postcard with a lighthouse on it." Dr. Brooks tilted her head. "Did that hurt?" I gave a hollow laugh. "It should have, right?" But the truth was, I wasn't even surprised anymore. Disappointed, yes, but it was the kind of disappointment that didn't even sting. It just settled, like dust you stopped noticing. I guess I thought if I kept showing up, kept being the one who handles things, maybe they'd see me differently. Dr. Brooks leaned forward a little. "You mean the mortgage?" I hesitated. Of all the secrets I carried, this was the one I hadn't said out loud. "I've been paying it for months, quietly." My throat tightened, like the truth was too big to fit through. She stayed still, waiting. "My sister asked me to take it over so our parents wouldn't stress. She made it sound noble, urgent, and my voice cracked. I said yes, I always say yes. "And what did you hope would happen?" she asked gently. I stared down at my hands. "Maybe they'd finally notice, maybe they'd thank me, maybe they'd stop assuming I don't need anything." Dr. Brooks's voice softened. "But they didn't." I shook my head. "They talk about Vanessa like she hung the moon. Meanwhile, I'm the one making sure the house she lives in doesn't get foreclosed." I laughed bitterly. "And I get to pass the potatoes." A pause. "And what do you want, Emily?" The question settled like a stone. I opened my mouth, closed it. What did I want? Not revenge, not attention for the sake of it. "I want to feel like I exist," I whispered. "Like I matter when I'm not solving something." Dr. Brooks gave the smallest of nods. "That's not too much to want." It felt like it was. For a moment, I imagined telling my parents everything, handing them the folder marked for them, showing them the receipts, the bank statements, the proof that I'd been there all along. But even in the fantasy, I couldn't picture what their faces would look like. Grateful, ashamed, changed, or would they just shift the blame again? Sometimes I wonder if I stopped paying if anything would happen. What do you think would? They'd yell, I said flatly. At me, not at her. She gave a long, thoughtful pause. Then why do you keep paying? That landed like a punch. I didn't have an answer that wasn't rooted in some deep, old habit of being the fixer, the invisible one who held everything up just so no one else would fall. A silence stretched between us, thick with what I couldn't say. And then something tiny stirred inside me. Hope. No, more like a question, the beginning of one. What if I didn't keep doing this? What if I said no? I wasn't ready to decide anything, not yet. But for the first time, I felt the possibility nudge against the edges of my certainty. Maybe I could change the ending. Maybe. Dr. Brooks scribbled something in her notebook, just a word or two, and then looked at me again, kind but firm. You deserve to be visible, Emily. The words felt too soft for how much I needed them, like whispering at a thunderstorm, but I nodded anyway. And in that quiet office, for the first time in a long while, I let myself wonder, what if I stopped asking to be seen and started seeing myself? Time didn't march, it slouched. One blurred weekend bled into the next, and somehow I became a ghost in my own life. The mortgage was still getting paid every first of the month like clockwork. No one asked. No one noticed. I was keeping their home standing, but no one once thought to ask how. It wasn't heroism. It wasn't grace. It was just survival. Routine. At family dinners, Vanessa shined like always. She had started doing sponsored hauls, now makeup, tea, protein powders. They love my vibe, she said once with a laugh, flicking her hair like it wasn't staged in every video. I sat across from her, nodding, smiling, lifting fork to mouth in perfect rhythm. My parents hung on every detail of her week, like she was the only frequency they could tune into. Sometimes I imagined standing up mid-meal and announcing, I pay for this roof, you know. But what would happen? A pause, a laugh, a deflection, they'd twist it, turn me into the martyr again. She didn't ask you to, Emily, you offered. No, Vanessa manipulated, and I agreed. There's a difference, but the thing about being the quiet one, no one sees the difference. My sessions with Dr. Brooks continued. I talked more now. Not much, not fast, but enough. Words that once felt stuck behind my teeth had begun to loosen, one by one. I feel like I'm shouting into the wind, I told her one day. Like I throw these little truths out there and they just vanish. She called it emotional erosion. It wears you down slowly, bit by bit. You give and give and give. And when you look down, your foundation's gone. I nodded. I didn't have the energy to cry. I was tired. Not in the way sleep fixes, in the way never being seen wears a soul thin. One Saturday, I sat alone at my small kitchen table, sorting receipts and bills. My system was meticulous, each payment documented, logged, printed. The folder marked for them was thick now, nearly full. I had kept it neat as if order could somehow make the sacrifice noble. I flipped to the latest page, October's payment confirmed. My balance dipped a little lower. I was fine, technically, but it stung. And in that moment, staring at a number that meant less for me and more for them, I asked myself a question I hadn't dared to before. What would happen if I stopped? The thought hit like a quiet thunderclap. Not the act, just the wondering of it. Would the house fall? Would the lies surface? Would anyone finally ask, how has this been paid all along? Or would they just assume the problem fixed itself? My chest tightened at the thought of being that disposable. I reached for my tea, the cup gone cold. Maybe that's what I was to them. A system, a service. Not a daughter, not a sister, but a mechanism that quietly filled in the cracks no one acknowledged. At the next dinner, nothing had changed. Vanessa talked about a possible collaboration with a skincare brand. My mom raved about the chicken she had air-fried. Dad made another joke about retirement. And I sat there, smiling on cue, blending into the backdrop like always. But inside, something had shifted, small but undeniable. I wasn't waiting to be seen anymore. I was watching. And something told me, sooner or later, the cracks would show. I just had to stop patching them long enough for the truth to leak through. It was the kind of Saturday morning I used to dream about having all to myself. Quiet, soft light through the blinds, a fresh pot of coffee just for me. No expectations, no interruptions, just the sound of birds outside and the slow hum of a world waking up. I sat at my dining table, feet tucked under me, laptop open, and that familiar folder spread out beside it. For them, receipts, spreadsheets, bank confirmations, even color-coded tabs. I had become unintentionally the invisible CFO of a house I didn't live in. With a strange sort of pride, I double-checked every line. April on time, May on time, June overlapping with a surprise tax bill, but I'd adjusted. July, August, September, flawless. Perfect financial record for a life that wasn't mine. I thought about taking a photo of the folder, posting it anonymously. Something petty and veiled like, guess who's keeping the lights on? But no one would care, or worse, they'd call it bitterness. So instead, I sat back and stared at the folder. There was something painful about how neat it looked, how intentional, like proof that I had mattered in this one hidden way. Then the thought came again. What if I just stopped? Not out of anger, not to cause chaos, but as a test, a tiny private experiment in truth. What would happen? Would Vanessa scramble to explain? Would my parents panic? Or would the house vanish into someone else's hands while they kept talking about her latest blog post? I imagined the payments bouncing, the first letter from the bank arriving. Would they call her? Would she lie? Would they believe her? My hands trembled slightly as I closed the folder, not from fear, from the sheer emptiness of the answer that had surfaced too easily. Probably nothing. That's what stung the most. Not the money, not even the silence, but the certainty that if I disappeared from their lives, they wouldn't even notice until something stopped working. I used to fantasize about dramatic recognition, tears, apologies, a family dinner where someone raised a glass and said, "Emily, we had no idea what you've been doing for us." Now, I just wanted to breathe without holding up the walls. The worst part, Vanessa hadn't even checked in. Not once. Not even a quick text to say thank you or ask how I was doing. It was like the arrangement didn't exist in her world anymore, like I didn't. I rose from the table, suddenly restless, and walked to the window. Below, people walked dogs, jogged with earbuds, carried pastries home in paper bags. Their lives looked simple, grounded, real. Mine felt like a performance I hadn't auditioned for, and even in my own apartment, I wasn't the main character. I looked back at the table. The folder sat there like a sealed secret, everything in its place, everything accounted for, except me. For a moment, I let my hand hover over it. Then I picked it up, slid it back into the drawer, and shut it quietly. Not in defeat, not yet, but with the slow, dawning realization that something was shifting, that my silence wasn't selfless, it was survival, and it was no longer sustainable. I wasn't ready to stop, not quite. But for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for imagining what it would be like if I did. My birthday always came quietly. It wasn't like I dreaded it, I just stopped expecting much from it. Like a train that used to stop at your station but now just flashes past without slowing down. You can't miss something if you never really had it. That morning, my phone buzzed. "Mom, dinner at 6. Vanessa's bringing wine." Red, that was it. No happy birthday, no cake emoji, not even one of those impersonal gifts people send in group chats. Just a reminder that dinner was happening, as it always did. And that Vanessa, of course, was bringing something worth celebrating. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I got up, dressed, and packed my emotions neatly into the same place I always did, somewhere under my ribcage, just behind the spot where disappointment lived. At the house, everything looked festive in that curated way that Vanessa liked to call effortless. A garland of eucalyptus on the mantel, gold-accented napkins, music playing from someone's playlist, probably hers. Vanessa greeted me with an air kiss and a dazzling smile. "Look at you, Em, you wore color." It was a navy sweater. My parents were bustling in the kitchen. My mom smiled, distracted. "Emily, sweetheart, can you pour the water?" "Sure," I said. I always poured the water. I walked to the dining table and began filling glasses, careful not to let the pitcher sweat onto the linens. My hands moved automatically, choreographed by years of repetition. Vanessa sat at the head of the table, laughing about some influencer who'd copied her latest post. "She even used the same hashtags," she said, clearly thrilled. "Which honestly just proves I'm doing something right." "She's just jealous," Mom said, smoothing Vanessa's hair like she was 10 again. "You're the real thing," Dad chuckled. "We should all be so lucky to have your work ethic." I looked up from the picture. Her work ethic. A set of knives sat in a box on the counter, wrapped in a red ribbon. I knew without asking they were a gift for Vanessa. "Just a little thank you for all the meals she makes," Dad had said, passing the box to her with a proud grin. "You're keeping this house together," Vanessa squealed. "You guys are the sweetest." I hadn't cooked a meal in this house in years, but I was keeping it together in a different way. Quietly, invisibly. No one mentioned my birthday, not once. I finished pouring the last glass, my hand tightening around the pitcher. A single drop slipped from the rim and landed on my father's sleeve. He looked down. Another drop fell, this time from my own fingers. Then the glass I was holding slipped. It didn't shatter. It simply tipped, clinking against the plate below and spilling cold water into his lap. He jolted up. "Emily, I reached for a napkin, but he was already standing, scowling, his pants soaked. "You are a useless daughter," he snapped, loud and sharp. The room went still. The word hung in the air, heavier than the water soaking into the cushion. Vanessa froze. My mother looked stunned, a dish towel in her hand mid-motion. I stood there, holding the empty glass like it might still redeem me if I clutched it hard enough. No one moved. No one spoke. I could feel the heat crawl up my neck. I looked at my father, waiting for him to take it back, to soften it, to say he didn't mean it. He didn't. He just turned away, grumbling as he blotted at his pants. I excused myself quietly, walked to the bathroom, closed the door. I didn't cry. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, expecting to see something cracked, rage, grief, shame. But all I saw was a face I barely recognized anymore. Pale, blank, exhausted, useless daughter. That was it then. That was how he saw me. Not as the one who paid the mortgage. Not the one who sacrificed quietly month after month, but the one who dropped a glass. I sat on the closed toilet lid and let the silence settle again. This time it wasn't comforting. This time it was decisive. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and scrolled to the automated payments. My thumb hovered for a second over the cancel button. Then I tapped. Confirmed. Done. The screen refreshed. Payment canceled. It felt nothing like I expected. No guilt, no fear, just space. Like something had uncoiled in my chest and finally let go. I stepped back into the hallway. The laughter had resumed, Vanessa talking about some Pinterest recipe. The water had been wiped up. The moment forgotten, but not by me. Because tonight the payments ended, and something else began. Weeks passed. Not a call, not a text. Not even a hint of recognition that something had shifted. I watched the mortgage payment fail like someone watches a candle burn out, quietly, with a strange calm. My banking app refreshed with a red exclamation mark and a message. Payment declined. No automatic retry scheduled. It was done. And still silence. No frantic call from Vanessa. No message from my parents. Just the stillness of a family too used to not asking questions, as if dysfunction was the language we all agreed to keep speaking. At first, I felt power in the quiet. But then, dread crept in, because silence could mean anything. It could mean they hadn't noticed yet. Or worse, it could mean they had, and they were figuring out how to clean it up without me, without acknowledging me, without giving me the smallest piece of what I had earned. I stared at the folder labeled for them and didn't open it. Let it collect dust. Let it become obsolete. They didn't know I'd stopped. And I wasn't going to tell them. I wanted to see what truth did when it was left to do its own work. It was almost poetic, watching the consequences inch closer like a wave in the distance. You can't stop it. You just wait for it to crash. And then dinner came again. Another Sunday, another performance. I wasn't going to go at first, but something inside me, a need to see it unfold, pulled me into my car and down the familiar road. The house looked the same. Vanessa's SUV in the driveway. Front porch swept clean. A wreath on the door that said "Gather" in warm cursive. Inside, the table was already set. "Emily," Mom said, kissing my cheek like nothing had happened. "I was just saying how we missed you last weekend." I hadn't been invited, but I smiled because I was good at that. "Work's been busy." Vanessa appeared in the hallway, a bit more flushed than usual. Her smile looked pasted on. "Wine?" she asked, holding up a bottle like a trophy. "Sure." We all sat, chicken again, potatoes, light conversation. Vanessa talked about switching hosting platforms for her blog. Dad chuckled about something his barber told him. Mom showed us a photo of her friend's grandson. Everything looked normal. But under it, something strained. Vanessa's laughter was a little too loud. Her phone stayed face down on the table. Her eyes darted toward mine once or twice, fast and cautious. I stayed quiet, just watched, because I knew the call had come, maybe not to me, but someone had heard from the bank. A missed payment like that doesn't hide for long. They were pretending nothing had changed, but something had. The temperature had dropped. The undercurrent had shifted. I could feel it. And in that stillness, my dread wasn't fear anymore. It was readiness, because something was coming. I could see it in Vanessa's rigid shoulders, in the way she refilled her glass before anyone asked, in the way Dad kept glancing at the clock like he had somewhere else to be. They didn't know how to bring it up. And I wasn't going to help them. I chewed slowly, listened politely, and nodded at all the right moments. Let them sit in their silence. Let them sweat in their secrets, because for once it wasn't mine to carry. And as I reached for the serving spoon to help myself to more green beans, I felt it, like a shift in gravity. The moment was coming. They just didn't know yet that I was done catching the pieces. Dinner was halfway over when it happened. The forkful of roasted carrots never made it to my mouth. I knew it was coming before he even said it. That strange, taut energy in the air had been building all night, coiling tighter with each forced laugh, each careful avoidance of anything real. Dad set his glass down a little too hard, the kind of clink that breaks conversation. "Vanessa," he said, turning toward her slowly. "Didn't the bank call about the mortgage?" The room froze. She blinked. "What?" "The mortgage," he said, his voice too casual, which made it worse. "You said you were handling it, but they called the house this morning." Vanessa's mouth opened, closed. I sipped my water, steady and silent. "They left a voicemail," Dad continued. "Said a payment had been missed. That's strange, isn't it? You told us months ago it was all automated." Mom looked between them now, confused. Vanessa forced a smile. "Oh, I think they made a mistake. Or maybe it was an old account. It was addressed to this property," Dad interrupted, tone sharpening. "Same mortgage ID number." I could see the sweat starting to gather at her hairline. She tried again. "It's probably just a processing issue. And you're sure you've been paying it?" That question sliced the air clean in half. Vanessa went quiet. I felt my heartbeat in my throat. The silence stretched long enough that even Mom picked up on it. She sat back in her chair, hands folding in her lap like she was preparing for something, anything. Vanessa finally looked at me just for a second. Her eyes were pleading, almost apologetic, but there was no room for rescue this time. I kept my gaze level, still, calm, let it come. Dad caught the glance, followed it. "Emily," he said, turning now, "do you know something about this?" My hands remained folded on my lap. I think," I said slowly, "Vanessa should explain." Her face crumpled. "I didn't mean for it to get out of hand," she blurted. "It was just supposed to be temporary." Mom straightened. "What was?" Vanessa swallowed. "I asked Emily to take over the payments a while ago, just until things with the blog picked up. I didn't want you two to worry." Dad looked stunned. "So you haven't been paying it?" Vanessa shook her head, shame rising fast now. "No. And Emily has." I nodded once. That's all it took. One nod and the entire illusion cracked open. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Dad leaned back like he'd been physically pushed. No one spoke, not right away. The weight of it, what I had been doing, what they hadn't seen, settled like dust on everything. "You've been paying our mortgage," Mom whispered. "For months," I said, quietly. Vanessa bowed her head. Dad exhaled slowly, rubbing the bridge of his nose like the headache had been there all along and was just now making sense. "And you didn't say anything?" he asked, voice quieter now. "You didn't ask," I said simply. The truth hung in the air, a simple fact. They never asked. They didn't think to, because for years I had made it easy for them to forget me. Vanessa blinked rapidly, biting her lip. "I didn't know how to fix it. I thought if I just kept going, maybe it would work itself out." "But you let her carry it," Mom said softly. Her voice held no anger, just disbelief. "All this time." Vanessa didn't answer. No one defended her. No one reached to comfort her. And for once, I didn't fill the space. I didn't reach for napkins or change the subject or say, "It's fine," because it was. The roles had shifted right there over a half-eaten plate of carrots. And this time I wasn't going to be the one to fix it. "I didn't mean to lie." Vanessa's voice was barely above a whisper, like saying it quietly might soften the impact. But the truth had already hit the table like shattered glass, sharp, irreparable. Dad didn't respond right away. He just stared at her with a look I'd never seen before, not anger, not disappointment, but realization. Like he was finally seeing something that had been in front of him all along. Mom broke the silence. "How long, Vanessa?" Her tone wasn't scolding, it was flat. Empty. Vanessa blinked. "Since February." "That's 8 months," Mom said, her eyes going to me and then back again. 8 months Emily's been handling something you told us you were responsible for. "I just thought," Vanessa faltered, her hands moving like she could rearrange the air around her into a better excuse. "I didn't expect it to last this long. I thought the blog would take off faster, and then I was behind and it just got harder to explain." "So you said nothing?" Dad asked. Vanessa looked directly at me this time. I didn't think she'd keep doing it. I met her stare and didn't flinch. Neither did I. The table was painfully still. It was like the entire house had finally heard something it had been refusing to listen to for years. Vanessa tried again. "Look, I didn't mean for Emily to carry you," Dad said sharply. "Because that's exactly what she did." She recoiled at his tone. So did Mom. For a moment I wondered if I should say something, step in, smooth it out. But then I thought, why? Why should I rescue her from the consequences I've been absorbing? I stayed quiet. "You knew we'd be upset," Mom said softly. "And instead of coming to us, you just let your sister carry the burden." Vanessa's chin quivered. "I didn't think you'd believe me. I didn't think you'd forgive me." "So instead," Dad said, "you let us believe you were the responsible one, that you had everything under control." No one said what we were all thinking, that they believed it because it had always been easy to, because she was Vanessa, the favorite, the center, and I had been the backdrop, the one who didn't complain, the one who didn't need much. Until now, until silence became revelation. I'm sorry," Vanessa said, turning toward me, her voice breaking. "I know I should have told you. I shouldn't have let it go this far." My hands were folded neatly in my lap. "I didn't do it for thanks," I said quietly, "but I also didn't do it to be erased." That landed hard. Mom's face cracked, remorse deepening in the lines around her eyes. She reached for her water glass but didn't drink. Dad sat back, arms crossed, shaking his head. "All this time and we had no idea." "That's kind of the point," I said. "No one asked. It wasn't just about the mortgage, it never had been. This was about years, decades, a lifetime of being the daughter who functioned so well they forgot I had feelings, needs, limits." "I'm proud of you," Mom said suddenly. The words sounded foreign coming from her lips. "I'm just ashamed we didn't see it." Vanessa looked down at her plate. No defense left. And in that silence, something shifted again. This time, the stillness didn't feel lonely. It felt like space being made. Finally, for me, Dad cleared his throat. "You've always been dependable, Emily, but that doesn't mean we should have taken you for granted." It was the closest he'd come to an apology, and in my family, that mattered. Vanessa stood suddenly. "I need air," she mumbled and walked out toward the porch. The door clicked shut behind her. Mom and Dad sat in silence. I looked at the roast chicken, the wine, the linen napkins. Same table, same food, but not the same dynamic, because now I was seen, not as a footnote in Vanessa's story, but as the daughter who stood quietly in the background and held up the house. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I just breathed. For the first time in a long time, the air didn't feel borrowed. In the days that followed, the silence changed. It wasn't the old kind, the kind that erased me, the kind I'd spent a lifetime breathing through. This silence was new, hesitant, thoughtful, like everyone was suddenly choosing their words a little more carefully. And for the first time, they were choosing them toward me. It started the very next morning. A text from Mom. "Mom, how's your week looking? Wanna grab lunch?" I blinked at the screen for a long moment. I actually had to reread it. Lunch with me. No Vanessa in the thread, no group chat, just my name, my invitation. I typed back a polite sure before I could overthink it. We met at a small cafe in town. The kind of place with paper menus and slow service, but Mom complimented the lemon water and actually asked about my job. "How's the team at the marketing firm? You're still remote, right?" She remembered. I answered slowly, cautiously. Like testing a bridge I wasn't sure would hold. When I mentioned the new client I'd been assigned, she actually listened. Nodded. Reacted. It was a 15-minute conversation. but it was 15 minutes more than I'd gotten in years. Later that week, Dad called, not a text, a call. "Just checking in," he said awkwardly. "Wanted to see if you needed anything." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was surreal. This sudden attention felt like sunlight after a life spent underground. Unfamiliar, a little blinding, but I let it touch me. I didn't rush to forgive or to analyze, I just received. And in the quiet of my apartment, I let the realization settle in. They were trying, not in some grand, sweeping way, but in slow, unsure gestures, and I wasn't chasing anymore. Meanwhile, Vanessa drifted to the edges. I heard from Mom in a careful aside that she hadn't come to dinner the following Sunday. She said she needed space. I didn't respond. What was there to say? For years, I'd lived in that space, quiet, invisible, holding weight no one acknowledged. And now, as that balance shifted, Vanessa stood where I used to. Not discarded exactly, but exposed. The golden daughter now dimmed. I didn't gloat, but I didn't reach for her either. She hadn't apologized again, hadn't messaged me, hadn't owned what she'd done beyond the table, and I wasn't going to fill that gap for her. For once, I let someone else sit with discomfort. In therapy, I told Dr. Brooks all of it. The lunch, the phone call, the silence from Vanessa. She smiled, that calm, grounding way she always did. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Strange," I admitted. "Like I'm learning to walk differently." "Differently how? I'm not bending anymore, I'm not compensating, I'm just letting people do the work of seeing me." She nodded. "And are they?" I looked down at my hands. "A little," I said. "Enough." The truth is, I still didn't fully trust it. Part of me waited for it to stop. For the spotlight to swing back to Vanessa, for the old rhythms to return. But another part, the quietest, strongest part, wasn't afraid anymore because I had nothing left to prove. I had done the invisible thing. I had paid and smiled and stayed small, hoping to be noticed. Now I was done hoping. I was living, not for their attention, but for my own peace. A year can pass without changing anything, or it can shift everything. 12 months ago, I was sitting in a house I paid for, pouring water into glasses at a dinner table where no one remembered it was my birthday. Today, I'm sitting in a condo with white walls, sage green trim, and the kind of stillness that doesn't feel like loneliness, but freedom. It's small. Mine, no mortgage folder. No hidden proof of my value, just me. A bookshelf I built myself. A tea kettle that whistles when it's ready. A journal on the nightstand, not full of wounds, but of questions. Dreams, tiny joys I never had room for before. On Sundays, the phone rings. It's always Mom first. "Hi, sweetheart," she says, always with that softness now. "Just checking in." Sometimes she tells me about her new garden. Sometimes she just wants to know what I'm cooking. She never used to ask those things. She never knew they mattered. Now she tries. Dad's different too. He doesn't gush. He's still Dad, reserved, practical. But he's the one who suggested we meet for breakfast a few weeks ago. Just the two of us. No agenda. Just pancakes and awkward conversation and the faintest, most surprising pride in his voice when I told him about the promotion at work. "We always knew you were solid," he said. No, I wanted to say, "You didn't," but instead I nodded, because what he meant was, I see you now. Vanessa, she's quieter, not gone, just restructured in my life. We text sometimes. She sends me reels, I send back hearts, surface-level warmth, but the imbalance is gone. She knows I won't carry her anymore. She knows that when she steps into the room, I won't be standing in the shadows to lift her higher. I've stepped into the light, too. And something strange happened when I stopped performing for attention. I became visible, not because I demanded it, but because I stopped shrinking. My therapist, Dr. Brooks, still keeps that office with the too perfect plant and the calming tones. We don't meet as often now, but when we do, we talk about things that aren't about survival. Last week, I told her I was thinking about taking a solo trip. She smiled and asked where. I didn't even hesitate. "Somewhere I don't have to explain myself." That's how I know I'm healing, not because the past doesn't hurt, but because it doesn't own me anymore. I used to believe love was something you earned with good behavior, with silence, with service. But love that has to be earned that way, that's not love. That's control. Now I give to myself what no one thought to give me before. I listen to my own voice. I ask myself how I feel. I say no. I say yes. I say enough. The journal I used to fill with questions like, why don't they see me? Or what else do I have to do? Now it's filled with lists of things I've done just for me. Little victories, like saying no to a family dinner because I'd rather go to a museum alone, or booking that massage, or deleting a message I didn't owe anyone a response to. Sometimes, late at night, I reread the entry I wrote on the day I canceled the mortgage payment. It says, "Let them wonder I'm done explaining." And now, on the last page of the journal, I wrote something new. I used to pay to be seen, now I live in full view for myself. And I meant it, because the biggest win wasn't the shift in how they see me. It was the shift in how I see myself. Not a role, not a burden, not the background, but the main character of a life I no longer apologize for. Some days that's still hard to believe, but most days it's not. Most days I pour myself a cup of tea, open my balcony doors, and sit in the quiet with a book in my lap and the sun on my face. And I think this is what peace feels like. Not explosive, not loud, just mine. I live here now. Fully, finally.